Dan is establishment. Dan is establishment Republican. He hates the Trump
whatever
one.
that means.
So he wanted to start more wars. So he's the least happy on this entire panel. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm feeling. It's funny because I'm feeling pretty happy right now because.
Cenk, no one could be more unhappy than you.
Cenk Uygur and Crystal Ball were guests on Piers Morgan's show, Piers Morgan Uncensored, to go up against MAGA right-wingers Dan Crenshaw and Vinnie Vincent Oshana from the Patrick Bet-David show. We're going to take a look at clips of this panel on Piers Morgan Uncensored. I will share my thoughts from time to time on this as well. This is a good one. Let's get into it.
He's got a chance, and he talked in quite a unified way last night. He's got a chance to try and bring the country together. Do you think he'll take that chance?
That's a great question. There's a lot to unpack. There was a lot said in the last few minutes, and I didn't get to hit any of it. And I actually think this conversation, first of all, about left-wing populism and right-wing populism and what populism even means, I think is really interesting. I hope we keep hitting on that. It was said before, he's a fake populist. Well, I hope so. Because populism is crap. I mean, populism is the art of telling you what you want to hear instead of the truth. That is populism. Yeah, I mean, of course. Dan
is the least happy in this
populism
panel.
Is all the time. The least what?
Dan is establishment. Dan is establishment Republican. He hates the Trump
whatever
one.
that means.
So he wanted to start more wars. So he's the least happy on this entire panel. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
I'm feeling. It's funny because I'm feeling pretty happy right now because.
Cenk, no one could be more unhappy than you. Surely, come on.
Yeah, and like I've never started any wars. I'm actually the only one here who actually bothers fighting in them. So don't talk to me about war. And look, populism is just lying. Populism is just lying. Liberals just lie to people. They bribe them with their votes. That was the Kamala Harris campaign slogan. We're going to give you $25,000 if you buy a new house. We're going to forgive your student loan debts. We're going to double the child tax credit, which was a Republican idea, by the way.
Joe Biden has done all kinds of work trying to forgive student loan debt, and some of it he's been able to get through, and some of it has been struck down by courts. So this is something that, I mean, I'm not going to defend the Biden and Harris administrations on everything, but Joe Biden did, they have tried to forgive student loan debt, and some of it they've been able to do. So that wasn't a lie.
Like, we're just going to bribe you if you just vote for me. And you know what? Nothing in your life is your fault. It's always somebody else's fault. You're the victim because of your skin color or gender. You're the victim. And people are so tired of hearing that. I speak to a lot of high schools. And when I bring up wokeism, when I bring up this victimhood ideology, that's actually what riles these kids up, which makes me really happy. It shows me that we're on a good track in America. They are sick of hearing this kind of stuff. That's what populism is. Now, maybe you have a different definition of it. You say it's against the elites. It's against the establishment. We need to be very clear about something. The Democrat Party does indeed have an establishment. You are correct about that. Nancy Pelosi orchestrated the downfall of Biden. That establishment orchestrated the insertion of Kamala Harris without any vote whatsoever. That's all true. But you cannot tell me there's an establishment in the Republican Party. There simply isn't. There hasn't been for a very long time. I'll do a quick thought experiment and prove it. Well, I'll do a quick thought experiment and prove it to you. You laugh. Stop laughing. It's annoying. So here's the thought experiment. I'm running in my primary.
You're it. Look in the mirror.
I can do one of two things. I can say I'm bucking the establishment or I'm for the establishment. Which one is going to get me more votes? Obviously, bucking the establishment gets me more votes.
Dan Crenshaw was the establishment. Cenk Uygur is right about this. And you don't think people like Mitch McConnell, that they're the establishment? Mitch McConnell is a Republican leader, and he is establishment through and through. Now, what happened to Dan Crenshaw is a couple of years ago, he was somewhat critical of Trump, but you can have no criticism of the dear leader, and eventually Dan Crenshaw fell in line and went full MAGA. And Dan Crenshaw talks about, always, blaming everybody else for your problems. His leader, Donald Trump, does nothing but blame other people for his problems. Donald Trump is the biggest crybaby that we've ever seen in national politics. I mean, in modern times, in the last 50 years or so. And this guy does nothing but blame other people for his problems. So spare me this BS from Dan Crenshaw about Democrats only want to blame everyone else.
So that negates the existence of any establishment. When 4% of our conference could take down our Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, we don't have an establishment. We don't have that unifying establishment. We never have. Like, what's the address for this establishment? How are they funded? Who are they? Who are these dark, murky people running things and using their little puppet strings to control everybody? It's not true. It's not true. And so the populism is a left-wing ideology that has infected some of the right. And yes, Donald Trump is going to do things that are pro-growth because populist tendencies tend to be anti-growth. They tend to be anti-free market. And that's bad for your children and your children's children. So let's on that real quick. And I forgot what Pierce's question actually was.
Well, it was really about. I'll tell you what it was, Dan. It was about unity and whether Trump has it in him to unify the country. Given how divisive he is,
and look,
but notwithstanding how big the win is, he's got a chance.
Well, I'm hopeful on that for a few reasons. One, right? Trump has had this chip on his shoulder for years after the 2020 election. And you know, we all know what that's about, but he's no longer running for re-election and he had a really clean sweep. That matters a lot to the man's psyche. Another thing, he cares about his legacy. Now he doesn't have to worry about re-election. He cares more than anything else about legacy. And for him, that means America is the best at every metric that you can imagine. So look, guys, we have 4 years of Trump already. He didn't govern as a fascist. And I'd love to hear what your definition of fascism is. I mean, is it packing the Supreme Court? Is it doing away with the filibuster? So by the way, are Democrats still in favor of those things? Are Democrats still now in favor of doing away with the filibuster and packing the Supreme Court? I'm just curious. Or are those now not part of the Democrat platform? Because those are fascistic tendencies as well, this authoritarian tendencies.
Okay, let me bring Cenk in. I mean, Cenk, look, the problem is, whatever you say this morning, to be honest, and I say this respectfully, is all just going to sound pretty hollow, because the truth is, the Democrats have taken just a gigantic drubbing. I mean, it's on a scale so big, it's humiliating. So almost everything that your side has been saying for the last year has just gone up in smoke. No one was buying into it. But no one was buying into anything Kamala Harris had to say about anything, it looks like. She actually did worse than Biden almost everywhere. I mean, that's quite an achievement. So what do the Democrats do coming out of the wreckage of this?
Yeah. So I don't know how many times I got to tell you this, Piers. I don't like Democratic leadership. I think they are grossly incompetent. I loathe them. Okay, look, they call Donald Trump a maniacal clown, and I agree with that. But they lost to him twice. So what does that make them? Utter losers. And they're all over TV now blaming the voters, blaming this, blaming that. That's not why they lost. They lost because the Democratic Party leadership is a bunch of elitist clowns who agree with Dan Crenshaw. They think, oh, there's no establishment. You guys are making it up. So, Dan, I'll tell you
why are they attacking me all the time? Why do they hate my guts? Okay, I'm their worst enemy. It's so easy for me to beat them. Okay. It's so easy for me to beat Democrats.
So let me explain.
I'm one of the best at it.
Yeah. You guys actually totally agree, and you will agree on corporate tax cuts in within days of Donald Trump winning. So, guys, he said there is no
Republican corporate tax cuts.
Can I?
What Democrat agrees on corporate tax cuts? Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, and Piers Morgan wants to play this game where just everybody on the left is exactly right. Cenk Uygur and Crystal Ball are not Democratic Party establishment people. They were critical, calling for a primary a long time ago, and that Joe Biden should have not been running for re-election. Cenk Uygur and Crystal Ball were calling for that long ago. But Cenk Uygur is correct here with Dan Crenshaw. The Republican establishment and the Democratic Party establishment, it's professional wrestling. It's good cop, bad cop, whatever analogy that you want to use. I mean, these are my analogies, but whatever analogy that you want to use, when it really comes down to push and shove, they agree on quite a bit. Now, you're going to have the social issue things that are major disagreements, and those are important. But like Cenk Uygur says here, you watch, the Democrats are going to fall in line on most of Donald Trump's economic policies that he tries to do. And they'll probably fall in line on a whole lot else of his agenda, mass deportations, and all of that. And, we know that the Democratic Party establishment does not support progressive policies that actual progressives like Bernie Sanders have pushed, like Medicare for All. They didn't even attempt to run on Medicare for All because there's a lot of crossover with the donors that Dan Crenshaw is getting money from and Nancy Pelosi is getting money from.
I just finished a point, okay? So, who's the establishment Republicans?
No Democrat agrees on that.
Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell's an establishment Republican. Almost all the Republican senators are establishment Republicans. And by the way, Nancy Pelosi is an establishment Democrat. Joe Biden is. What it means is you take donor money and you serve donors. You guys are all crooks. So you notice what Dan said? He said, we're going to do I think Trump is smart enough to do pro-growth. You know what that means? It means tax cuts for the rich that are all Dan's donors. And they were Kamala Harris's donors.
When you say
it's not a left-right issue.
Cenk, when you say
Can I put some economic
hang on,
statistics?
hang on,
you're going to do corporate tax cuts, aren't you? You're going to do corporate tax cuts, aren't you?
No, let me just say something.
You're going to do corporate tax cuts, aren't you?
Cenk, when you say you guys...
I want Dan on the record.
Hang on, Cenk, when you say, Cenk,
there should be
you guys are all...
I told you.
Hang on.
I told
Let me speak. Let me speak. When you say you guys are...
Good economic sense.
I understand, Cenk, that the mood inside your body might be running hot this morning. However...
Piers Morgan is so damn condescending. He does this to he never does this to the Republicans. He never, the right-wingers, the MAGA people. He never gets his little Weasley jabs in on them, but he does this to people like Cenk Uygur and Crystal Ball and Francesca Fiorentini and other progressives that go on Piers Morgan's show. He never gets in these little jabs on the right-wingers. And Cenk Uygur is absolutely right about Dan Crenshaw being a prick and being a crook. And almost everybody in Congress. This is one thing where right and left can agree. Now, they don't agree on who the crooks are, but they're almost all crooks on both sides. And they're going to get through Donald Trump, more corporate tax cuts.
No, it's not. You're not getting it.
When you shout, you guys are all
idiot Democratic establishment lost.
I get it, but when you say you guys are all crooks, and you got someone like Dan sitting there, it's a ridiculous thing to say. Why do you use that language?
It's not.
It is ridiculous.
It's not.
Piers Morgan doesn't think that all of the, he's a foreigner, so maybe he doesn't understand, even though he's covering these topics, he doesn't understand what is going on in Congress. The Congress of the United States is made up of crooks. Cenk Uygur is absolutely right about this. And if Piers Morgan can act shocked and chagrined that, oh my, I have the vapors right now because Cenk Uygur is saying that Dan Crenshaw and Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell and these other, people like Joe Manchin are not crooks, give me a break.
Piers, then you don't understand politics at all.
So Bernie Sanders
money
isn't.
We said I don't understand politics, but I was the one who called Trump winning big the entire
crooks
time.
Like Dan Crenshaw. So let me ask you something. Let's ask Vinny.
Bernie Sanders isn't a multimillionaire who takes donor money?
Yeah. Okay, Vinny, do you think...
What about ism from Dan Crenshaw?
That the donor money is do you agree with Dan? Do you agree with Dan that the donor money is irrelevant? They don't serve the donors at all. There are no establishment Republicans. We're all making it up. And golly gee, even Trump shouldn't have gone in a populist direction. And this is all wrong. And they should just serve the donors. And we're all imagining it. Vinny, you're on the right. What do you think?
Nobody's serving donors. Our incentive structures are not. I think your incentive structures.
Hey, it's not your turn, Dan. Let Vinny talk.
Totally different than mine.
Yeah, hold on, just real quick, Dan, just to clarify.
I can't see anybody. How are we supposed to know?
Well, Dan, just to clarify, I am a United States Air Force veteran as well, so I didn't serve in combat, but I am a veteran, so my brother, my sister, but that's besides the point. And I do agree with Cenk. You cannot say that there's no establishment. There's establishment left, and there's establishment right. And for all these people taking donor money, you are the establishment. Donald Trump is a beast because he didn't need anybody's money. And to go back to Kristen's point, when she mentions Mattis and Kelly.
Are you guys high right now?
No, I'm actually so very sober.
Like, he's taking a ton of donor money. He's taking a ton of donor money. Every single one does, including your favorite Bernie Sanders, including Donald Trump. You guys can't just make up facts
not corporate
right now.
money like you.
And then do single variable analysis about.
That's a fact.
And you can't just do single variable
He literally
analysis
doesn't take corporate PAC
about
money.
donor money equals corruption.
Look, I think we're getting in.
Can I actually?
Let me bring in. Hang on. Let me bring in Crystal. Let me bring in Crystal. I want to ask you this, Crystal. Kamala Harris made a big play of abortion rights. She really bet the bank on that, delivering enough women to get her over the line. And there was this weird poll, the Seltzer poll that came out of Iowa at the weekend that really excited everyone, where she had, the normally very accurate pollster, she had Kamala up 3 in Iowa, and it was apparently women over 60 that were driving that. And the general feeling then was, wow, maybe older women in particular, who might be old enough to remember life before Roe versus Wade, may come out and punish Trump enough where they win. But they simply didn't come out in anything like the numbers people expected. And you also had at the same time, obviously, a lot of black men and Latino men going to Trump and so on. But the women just did not come out for Kamala Harris. Why? And was it that abortion in the end, yes, it's an important issue, of course it is, but not as important to the average American who can't afford to put food on the table and is incensed by the fact that at the same time of this cost of living crisis, you have nearly 10 million illegal immigrants coming over the border, which is putting huge pressure on public services. Was it they just bet the bank on the wrong issue? That actually, yeah, it's important, but not as important as I kept saying. I think it's the economy, and immigration. They're the 2 reasons that Trump is so popular.
I think that I and others overlearned the lesson from 2022, because in 2022, I was saying, oh, look at the economic numbers. Voters are saying economy, inflation, these are their number one issues. The economic numbers, by the way, were far worse at that point. And I said, it's a wrap. Like, it's going to be a massive red wave. And then that red wave didn't materialize. So I took from that this issue, which had really been a game changer in terms of the American public in a way that, frankly, I did not anticipate before. But I think part of what is different in 2024 is, number one, it's, much larger general election electorate. So that's a big change. And number two, as much as I think there are failures on the Democratic part, I also think we can't deny that Trump is this uniquely charismatic performer. And people love the show. So he outperformed every Republican on the ticket, which is also a rebuke to, a lot of Republicans who thought that they had to get rid of him because of all of his baggage. I actually think he's the most, likely to win of the Republican set. I think Ron DeSantis would have been in much more difficult terrain. So every single Republican Senate candidate underperforms him, save for, I believe, 1. So I think that's part of why. But, look, the country overwhelmingly says that we're on the wrong track. They're very dissatisfied with the economy. Joe Biden's approval rating is very low. Those are very favorable conditions for a challenger to come in and win. And so when voters say at the end of the day, economy and inflation, those are my number one issues, I believe them when they say that.
I think Crystal Ball is right with what she's saying here. I mean, there are a lot of reasons. You can say it was racism and misogyny that plays into it, and other factors. But what we've seen is around the world, whoever is in place was in place while all of this inflation was happening and economic problems. People have voted them out. And that's probably simply what it came down to. I don't know that it's people love, obviously there are people that love Donald Trump. But I think it really comes down to, even though in a lot of ways economic numbers were good, people looked at prices in the grocery store and gas prices, even though some of those things had come down. And that's what they voted on in pretty large numbers. And what you basically have in our country, we've had this continual pendulum swing where Republicans screw things up and then the Democrats have to come in and try to fix things. And that's what Joe Biden had to try to do. Obama did it after George W. Bush. We're likely to have the same thing after Trump, if we're allowed to have elections again after Trump, if he doesn't just proclaim himself king. Donald Trump is going to tank the economy, and then some Democrat is going to have to come in and fix it all. That's That's what I believe. There are other factors, sure, but people in the United States and around the world have just been looking to blame whoever is in power, get them out, and bring somebody else in. And you have this fallacy that people think that the economy was great under Donald Trump, and it's like, bring him back. So I predict in 2 years with the midterms, you're going to see if they just don't totally screw up everything, people are going to be they're going to say to the Republicans, we handed everything over to you. It's been 2 years. You didn't improve anything. We're going to see what the other guys can do, and back and forth like we've had for decades in the United States. But I think Crystal Ball and Cenk Uygur definitely have some points. And I agree with Vinny Oshana from Patrick Bet David about that there is an establishment. There's a Democratic Party establishment. There's a Republican Party establishment. Dan Crenshaw is, he's in both worlds. He's that Republican establishment, but he's also got to be MAGA because that's the only way that you can survive as a Republican for now. But what do you think? Let me know what you think about this panel and what they're having to say, what the reasons were that Donald Trump won, Kamala Harris lost. Is it something else other than this? Do you agree with Cenk Uygur and Crystal Ball, or do you agree with Dan Crenshaw and what each of them had to say on Piers Morgan's show? Let me know in the comments what you think. I love to read your comments. Make sure to give me a like and subscribe. Channel's growing quickly. I want to continue to grow more and more. I'm up around 40,000 subscribers. I'd like to get to 50,000, 100,000, and keep this growing throughout, hopefully, these Trump years to fight against these MAGA nut jobs. That's what my goal is with this channel. So please subscribe if you haven't done so yet. This is Chris on Culture. I will see you in the next video.